opportunity to express his religious views in hopes to further indoctrinate people into, his belief system and what he feels is his legal right and religious right to be able to do. So joining me now, Tom Kneff, former prosecutor and defense attorney, and Dan Schorr, who's the Inspector General for Yonkers, New York, and former criminal prosecutor. And we're waiting on our Dallas Bureau guest. Jeff King will be joining us momentarily, and he's a criminal defense attorney. All right, good afternoon, gentlemen. And Dan, I'll begin with you. Give me your thoughts on this case.
People refer to this case as a polygamy case, and it's really not about polygamy. It's about child sex abuse, and that's the important fact here. These are 12 and 15-year-old girls who were, whether they were legally married or not, they were being sexually abused by this guy, and he's claiming a First Amendment religious freedom argument to defend this action, and of course that's ridiculous. Hopefully he'll be convicted. The judge has a tough time because the judge needs to knock down these arguments, but do it in a way that doesn't lead to appellate issues by not giving him the chance to speak out.
That's very true. What do you think?
Kim, there's always one running thread whenever you see these religious gurus on trial. They are all, part of their godly message all somehow involves having sex with underage girls. And you look at, David Koresh was accused of that.
Yes.
You have Amy Smart's captor, who it took years and years to get to trial. Similar to Jeff's. And, they also, as Dan was saying, try to use the soapbox as their, time to kind of educate the public on their extreme views, and of course, it all comes directly from God. We know that.
Does it seem like the judge is reining him in enough? I mean, because he's definitely, giving these kind of dissertations.
I think, in a case like this, the judge has a balancing act, because at the same time, you don't want the trial to become a circus. It's already has vestiges of that, but you also want to protect the record and make sure that upon conviction, this guy isn't going to have, a right to appeal. And I think that was also an issue. We brought up Amy Smart. I mean, it seems like a lot of these guys try this self-affected, bizarre behavior almost to kind of pad themselves towards some sort of, either not an insanity defense or an appeal based on the fact that they weren't competent to stand trial in the first place.
Right. Okay, well, let's bring in Jeff King, criminal defense attorney. He joins us now from the Dallas Bureau. This is a complicated case in the fact that it's always, as a prosecutor, was for me a nightmare to have a defendant that's pro per representing themselves, because you do have to be so careful about the appellate record. You do want to give them their opportunity to present their case. And so far, though, he's not doing such a great job, Jeff, because he's refused to cross-examine witnesses. Oh, and he gave no opening statement. Can you hear me, Jeff?
I'm sorry, I did not hear that last question.
Oh, the whole thing was to you, like your thoughts on this, because he's representing himself, Warren Jeffs.
It's pretty ridiculous, to be honest, but I can't say that I'm entirely surprised given what I've read as far as his statements go in court. You've seen this kind of thing before, and there is, as you mentioned, there's concern about the appellate record, but he's allowed to defend himself. As long as the judge finds that he's reasonably competent to do so, he can stand in his own defense. And now, unfortunately, it's kind of turning into a circus, I think.
Yeah, it really is. That's the thing. And, they've got compelling evidence, photos of him kissing, cuddling a 12-year-old. I mean, it's
not to mention the fact that several were pregnant.
It's just, exactly. Talk about compelling evidence. There are no words. Okay, let's get to a couple other stories here. One from Fox News: divers searching the pond for the missing little girl. Looks like, of course, that in fact is the little girl. I'm sure they've been able to, I guess, confirm that to their satisfaction, because that's what the reports are saying.
Right. Now it's a question of finding out what was the cause of death, who was involved. It's very rare that a child is abducted or killed by someone who they've never had contact with. It's usually someone they have had contact with, whether it's a family member, a friend. She was reportedly on Facebook. Maybe it was someone on Facebook who posed as a younger child but was really an older predator. So these are the leads that I'm sure the law enforcement community over there is pursuing right now.
Okay, so what are you going to look for if you're assigned this case at the DA's office, Tom? Like, what are you going to try and do to narrow it down? Because they seem to, I don't know if they have enough clues. They at least knew that they had to go to that body or area of water to look, which I thought was interesting.
That's a big question I have. It hasn't really been touched on with the media, so I can only conclude that there's something that law enforcement doesn't want to reveal. But simply because an 11-year-old girl goes missing, you don't start sending divers into the Connecticut River or into ponds unless you have some indication that she may be in there tragically.
11-year-old,
and they were right, which is all goes all the more. So there's something more to that. I mean, all we really heard about so far, mother, stepfather, the custodial parents, by all accounts.
Yeah, what about the dad? I don't know. Jeff, you can hear us now, but we're talking about the little girl, the 11-year-old girl from New Hampshire that was found. They're saying that this is her body in the Connecticut River. There was some concern about the mental health of her, I guess her father, to say that he's had some problems in the past, and potentially maybe they're looking at him in some way, in some fashion.
And I'm sure he does have some problems in the past, but it's so early to be making those kinds of conclusions. I mean, for all we know, he could be putting on some kind of act because he sees this coming down the road, and people take advantage of that way too much about how our system looks into that.
Well, let me be
and
specific.
It could be a concern, but it's too early.
Who has the mental health issues. Her biological father was, issuing the pleas and holding, talking to the press about it. But yeah, the biological father is Adam Laro, and that's not the one I'm talking about. Wendell Noyes, just to be clear for our viewers.
Okay.
Tom?
Yeah, it's sad. It makes you feel sinister when something like this happens and you're immediately wondering about the father or the stepfather or the parents. But as Dan said, in the vast majority of child abduction cases, it's usually someone who knows the child. So, I mean, beyond the family, the next thing I think everybody needs to be looking at is what sort of activity she had going on online. Anytime you have a missing teen, missing tween, nowadays you want to look at Facebook.
Did she meet
someone? Was she going to meet someone at the mall? Some perhaps older man who disguised himself as being her age? I mean,
something to that effect. It's a small community, too, Dan, right? I mean, it's like 800 people. There's one blinking stoplight. They said a couple of stores. I mean, somebody had to have seen something.
And you referenced the stepfather before. He had a prior domestic violence incident. He had been cited as someone who was a danger. It doesn't mean that he's responsible, but certainly the police are looking at him.
You would have to, right? That's being responsible.
Absolutely.
Well, it appears also, Kim, to have started in the house. I mean, it's not a situation where, let's say, she did go to the mall with her friends and disappeared. She left the house unexpectedly. Both her parents say, it was not something, she didn't go out of the house by herself. So you have to wonder, did someone in the house take her out? Or was she perhaps lured out of the house by, someone she met online or someone else she had a prior relationship with?
Something, Jeff, that's interesting, and it's sad because they didn't issue an Amber Alert for her right away because she didn't meet the criteria for an Amber Alert, which was that you have to usually have a description of a vehicle or a person that the child was last seen with before they can issue an Amber Alert, which I think is sort of a technicality that shouldn't be so closely, observed and adhered to, Jeff.
It is, and I think it's one of those technicalities that had it been in another jurisdiction, they may have issued one just for the heck of it. And it's really unfortunate. I think this is going to really cause them to take a close look at how those Amber Alerts are actually issued and the criteria that goes into it. Because frankly, I didn't even know that until I read about this story, that was one of those technicalities. And it really surprised me. And I think it potentially could have saved this little girl's life.
Yeah, it's very sad. I mean, there still is an FBI award for $25,000, and a community member added $5,000 for information.
Right.
Anyone who might know something, about the case or about what happened to her, or any kind of tip or clue. Obviously, I think they got some kind of tip. We were saying, Tom, because the fact that they went to that body of water, they didn't just randomly select and go there. Although it's approximately a mile from where she lives, I guess. And by the way, speaking of the computer, she was literally last seen at her computer, Dan.
Right.
Right.
So, and I think, as Tom said, there's definitely some information that law enforcement has that they're not revealing, because this has moved very, very rapidly.
And by now they know, if they don't have a formal cause of death, they certainly know what injuries were on the body, whether there's signs of her being held captive, whether she's bound. So they are probably following those leads now, and hopefully they'll find out who's responsible.
Well, Tom, I hate to say it, but the forensics on this, like toxicology, pathology, everything that they're going to run will be very important. She was last seen on July 25th, so not too much time has elapsed from the point where she was, abducted and sadly, killed. So perhaps they can still get a lot of forensic evidence, unlike, the case where poor little Kaylee Anthony, you weren't able to because 5 months had passed.
Kim, it's so, the power of what, is becoming known as the CSI effect, CSI effect is so dramatic. And we saw that in Casey Anthony. I finished a trial that I was on in Manhattan for a few weeks last week, and I actually went out with the jurors afterwards to a bar by the courthouse just to kind of get their insight. And there was in the trial, there was a sword found at the scene that the defendants had allegedly used, and the police officers came in and told the jury how they don't test for DNA in a case where there's an arrest made at the scene and when a weapon's recovered. And just talking to the jurors afterwards, they're like, we can't believe that they wouldn't have tested for DNA. And you know, the whole point is like, look, they found the culprits at the scene. The victim, thank God, was alive. He gave a recount of what happened, and they found the weapon. Really, DNA wasn't an issue. But so many people in today's day and age with all these legal dramas on television just can't wrap their arm around that.
Best, you know,
they think they know best, and there's an expectation, unfortunately, created by Hollywood that in any case you have to have a cause of death, you have to have DNA, and it's kind of making circumstantial evidence obsolete nowadays.
And the fact that she was found underwater may hurt the process of finding out what injuries there were. And depending on the temperature of the water, that could slow or speed up decomposition.
If it was very warm, it's going to speed it up. Cooler bodies of water, we saw, like with Lacey Peterson, you were able to see, even though she had been in the water for a long time, that's by where I used to live, where I grew up, that water's very cold, so it was able to help preserve a lot of
and also certain injuries can speed up decomposition, so we'll find out more soon.
Okay, Jeff, I know we're going to have to let you go, but we'll give you the final thoughts, last words on this.
Well, I agree 100%. And as far as the CSI and all the DNA stuff goes, and I'm a defense attorney, and that is always part of our voir dire, and it is down here with the prosecutors as well. And whenever you have jurors that watch those shows and read those kinds of books and are very into the dramatic effect of what DNA evidence actually does, I mean, prosecutors bounce those jurors from our panels all the time. You know, as defense attorneys, we kind of like them on there. But,
because they hang
prosecutors kick
juries
them all the
about
time.
not guilty when people are guilty. Yeah.
Right.
This jury still voted. This jury still voted guilty.
Yeah.
Despite the lack of DNA.
Exactly. All right. Well, Jeff, thank you. Sorry we had some problems with your audio there, but we appreciate you coming on the show. Jeff King, criminal defense attorney out of Dallas. Thanks for being here with us.
Thank you, Kim.
Okay, we're going to take a quick commercial break. Before we go, we formally invite you to participate in our FoxNews.com live poll. Our You Decide poll for today, Tuesday, August 2nd, is, would you vote for the deficit reduction plan? Choices are yes, no, or you're not sure. And we want to say thank you for participating yesterday. Final tally responses from 30 countries and 48 states. We're going to be right back after this break. Stay with us.